On this week's episode, I'm excited to have Broc Edwards as a guest. Broc is the founder and CEO of Pronoia, a strategic advisory and venture capital firm. While working several years on Wall Street as an investment banker, Broc fine-tuned his expertise in negotiating deals, raising capital, and powerfully positioning his clients to succeed. He has repeatedly demonstrated industry prowess and business acumen, closing over $1.2 billion in M&A transactions and raising over $800 million in the debt and equity markets. He attributes much of his success to his rugged, never-take-no-for-an-answer mentality and sheer will to succeed despite the obstacles. Introducing the founder and CEO of Pronoia, Broc Edwards. Welcome to the show, everyone. Today we have Broc Edwards, CEO and founder of Pronoia. Broc, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you. Could you walk us through a little bit about your background, what you do, Broc, for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Michigan, and you can see I went to Michigan State University, so I'm a proud Spartan. I was always very entrepreneurial. I grew up starting different businesses. My father was a small business owner. I went out and worked on Wall Street for several years, and then decided I wanted to jump back into entrepreneurship, and since started a couple companies. So the focus at Pronoia, we're a strategic advisory and venture capital firm. Really looking to partner with founders, partner with entrepreneurs, people that might be in that underbanked space. And there's Wall Street's a dangerous place to play if you're not really accustomed to it, if you don't know the rules of the road, if you will. So really trying to bridge the gap between entrepreneurship and Wall Street. So have some phenomenal clients working on some strategic initiatives and some capital raising projects. And it's an exciting time to be in the market, that's for sure.
Well, thanks so much for that. What kind of clients do you usually work with?
Yeah, it depends. I would say in general, usually these entrepreneurial companies are really impact driven. They're looking to make an impact in the market. They're looking to do something that's, reaching a lot of people or impacting a lot of people. The ranges, I'm on a Series A, a Series B, a Series C right now. So there's a wide range in that as well. But these companies are looking for capital to grow. They're looking for strategic advice to grow as well. Just how do they be competitive in the market? How do they go out and raise capital at an attractive valuation? And it's nice to have someone in their corner that's walked the walk before, talked the talk, and know how to be a powerhouse in the boardroom.
That's great. So you're basically there as advisory and consulting to help other companies raise capital. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a large portion of what we do. We do some ancillary, presentation building, modeling, some of those services as well that might not become in-house to them. It might be something we do a lot of modeling work. We do a lot of presentation work as well. Some of these services aren't necessarily built in-house of these organizations. So it's nice to have an outside expert that can help with that.
Oh, that's great. So just because I'm just recently doing this now, and so you used to work on Wall Street and then you started your own company. What was that transition like when you were working for someone and then you're like, well, I have no pay now. How do I jump to entrepreneurship full time?
Absolutely. I think for me, one of the big breaking points, if you want to call it that, was when I was trying to reconcile having an executive assistant, having a team that was working under me, but then also being part of a larger team where I had, more senior people that I actually reported to. So making that transition was healthy from that mindset perspective. It was good to have more of that freedom. I've always viewed myself as a leader, viewed myself as someone who can, manage and hold people accountable really well. And that part of the transition was easy, right? Because I could just sit in my unique ability. I could show up powerfully. I think the side part of it was really realizing that, you no longer have benefits. You no longer have kind of the golden handcuffs, they call it, of Wall Street, where you're going to get paid a lot of money, but you're going to have to be there for a long time. And just trusting in yourself, I think, is the biggest thing. Being confident in your ability to drive things forward. I know your background as well, coming out of more of a corporate environment into the unknown of Wall Street, if you will, isn't always comfortable. But to me, it's always about betting on yourself. And if you truly believe that you can show up, you can do the job well, you can win clients over and build solid relationships in the market, you're going to be okay no matter what you do. And I've always held fast to that and certainly made the transition easier because I trusted myself.
Yeah, absolutely. So this wasn't your first business, as you mentioned. What was your first business you've ever started?
It's a great question. I remember when I was a little kid, the Livestrong bracelets came out. And this was the first, silicone bracelet that came out. It wasn't really a trend at the time, but the trend happened really after that bracelet had come out. And I remember there was a local shoe store in Michigan, like a shoe store, kind of athletic running apparel store. And they were able to get these Livestrong bracelets when they were, top of the market. And they're all $1. It went to a good cause. It was, a way to fundraise for the Livestrong brand. And I would go to the store and buy them for $1. So if I could find, 20, I would buy all 20 of them. And I would go and I would sell them for $5 just because they were so tough to find. So there's a pretty good, maybe just call it an arbitrage opportunity as opposed to a true business model. But being a younger kid and starting to see just there's opportunities in business. Even the most simple things was really fun.
Got it. So was it at that moment you realized you want to be an entrepreneur, or do you just kind of play the field, kind of figure out, okay, let me explore getting a 9 to 5 job or Wall Street, 12-hour days?
Yeah, that's 12 hours might be a little light, but 12 hours might be halftime in a day. But in all seriousness, growing up with a father who's a small business owner, I think that contributed a lot to the goals and passions that I had. Just being in that environment, we're all a product of the environment we're raised in, and seeing that he had the freedom to do things both financially as well as time when he wanted to take time off work was really interesting to me. And that's when I was a really young kid too. So I guess I was impressionable like everybody else, but I've always had a business mindset, right? So trying to figure out where can you make money, where can you impact people, what's missing in the market, and trying to fill those gaps. So I would say a combination of seeing my grandfather was an entrepreneur as well, so maybe there's a little bit in the bloodline. But in my opinion, there's nothing better than being your own boss. I mean, it's a mindset to go into a corporate role, to go into a banking role, even and work for someone else. There's so many great experiences, knowledge, insight that you can gain from that. I certainly wouldn't be the professional I am today if it wasn't for that. So I'll definitely tip my cap to Wall Street. But at the same point in time, I knew that was part of the journey. That wasn't the destination. But I wanted to get some of that professionalization. I wanted to learn some of those skills before really launching on my own.
Got it. So you're saying it's because of your family, your dad, your grandpa, that you got into entrepreneurship, and you liked it and it liked you back.
Absolutely. Yeah, it liked me back. That's the good part, right? It's one thing to like it and to not have a great outcome. But fortunately, I've been able to be blessed with the opportunities I've had.
Great. So tell me about the support you received when, I guess, you told your family, hey, I'm going to venture out on my own, start a business. Was it scary, or what kind of emotions were going through your family?
Yeah, that's a great question. If my family watches this, I apologize, but it was probably mixed, to be honest with you. This was at a time when it was the middle of COVID, so no one knew what was going on. Middle of COVID, you're leaving the middle of the job market being very dicey with COVID, especially. People weren't sure what was going to happen, if firms were hiring, if there's a hiring freeze. It wasn't a great time in terms of those kind of macroeconomic, external factors. But again, it goes back to trusting yourself. Once my family learned more about what I was doing and how I was doing it, they were able to get on board, as if they needed to get on board, but they were able to get on board. They've always trusted and believed in me, so that was never a question of doubt in their mind. But definitely hearing that you're leaving this cushy, multi six-figure Wall Street job with good benefits, an apartment in New York, to go rough it on the streets in Michigan a little bit, trying to start something up, a very different mindset there.
Got it. So what made you move from, I guess, New York to Michigan? Was it because your family's there, or was that just where the business opportunity was for your field?
Yeah, so we're actually virtually, our whole company is all virtual. So for me, it was more just getting back to my roots. I'm from Michigan originally. I went to Michigan State and enjoy, kind of the environment and everything there. So that was a big part of it. Also, living in New York City in the middle of COVID isn't fun. Wearing a mask to enter your apartment lobby, wearing a mask to get on the elevator. Those were things that just weren't that attractive, especially when you're in New York and call it a 400 square foot apartment. So being able to be outdoors, I've always enjoyed, outdoors and having some opportunity to get outside. So coming back to Michigan was a natural transition. I thought I would be in New York a little bit longer, but it is what it is. You got to roll with the punches.
Of course, yeah, you just gotta go wherever it's more, I guess, economical, especially in the startup phase.
Absolutely.
So before you left, did you have clients lined up? Did you get that legal stuff worked out before, or kind of like what was the transition? Was it just like, I'm leaving and then I'm gonna get everything started, or do you kind of have a transition in place before you officially left?
Yeah, there's a bit of transition. So we had already had a few clients. We were building the business. So for me, part of the transition was easier because I knew I could take a small salary, right? I wasn't taking the full on, I've got nothing. I'm just going to, build the plane as I'm flying it. So my risk tolerance, I joke with my friends, my risk tolerance is high in comparison to 99% of the population. It's also very calculated. So I'm all about taking calculated risks, understanding the risks that I am taking, and trying to make sure that's in alignment with my values, in alignment with my future goals. As long as you can run it through those filters, I think there's great opportunity. But at the end of the day, knowing that I did have something, it wasn't just, okay, I guess how I'm going to figure it out, right? Now I'll see what I want to do with my life. That made it a lot easier to make that transition.
Got it. So what kind of advice would you give to someone who has a corporate job right now, but is kind of working on a business? At what point do you think they should execute and leave?
It's a great question. This is put a little legal disclaimer. This isn't pending advice, but for me, I've always joked to my friends, I want to work until my side hustles have side hustles. And it's kind of a funny phrase because if you're, in a corporate role, you have some, business thing on the side. Maybe that's the goal, to make that your main thing. And for me, again, it's about trusting yourself, right? It's about believing in the process. If you truly have a product you're passionate about or a service you're passionate about, I think the results take care of themselves. So many businesses in the market today don't really believe in what they do, or they're just pushing product, just pushing a service. So to me, it's never been easier to be differentiated by just showing up powerfully, being passionate about what you do and how you do it. And as long as you can do that in the market, and there is a market for what you're trying to offer, I think there's great opportunities. So being calculated in the risk you're taking, I'm not going to say just quit tomorrow, bang on your boss's door, I'm out of here. But I think running through in your mind, what is the opportunity? What do you want to be happy with? So many people I hear today, I think there's probably an inaccurate quote, but 69% call it of people aren't happy with their corporate roles or happy at their jobs. I mean, to me, life's too short. So I would rather take the plunge, right? Go and do something that's a little bit more risky. But if you truly believe in yourself, and I always knew, even if I failed at whatever I was going to do, right? Even if I failed at this first business, that wasn't going to matter because I was going to find a way to be gritty, to be successful. It was going to be the next business that was going to, take me to where I wanted to go. So as long as you can trust that that's going to be true for you, if you work hard and make the right relationships, then I think the safety net is there, even though you might not realize it.
Right. So speaking about the passionate part of it, I've talked to a bunch of entrepreneurs, and there's some, I'm not trying to put anyone down, but there's some ideas which are just not great in my opinion. And I guess the general consensus or the general crowd would agree.
Yeah.
I guess at what point should you not necessarily give up, but kind of change your business model or idea without quitting entrepreneurship altogether?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's kind of two ways to look at it. The first one is just market opportunity, right? You probably see a lot of startup decks where they have a big funnel or a big circle and it says, this is our market opportunity. It's a $43 billion opportunity or something crazy. It always seems inflated. But knowing that there is some type of addressable market that you've gone through the exercise and understand is actually there, I think to me, that's the first point of it. The second part of it, a market is just the buying and selling, right? It's just the exchange of services. Like on the stock market, someone has to be selling in order for you to be buying. And in that case, usually one person is losing the transaction because it's going up or down and you're kind of caught in the middle, right? So for me, knowing that there could be a market, but it's more about the receptivity. Are people actually buying what you're trying to sell? Are they enjoying what you're trying to sell? You can do a lot of research. You can do a lot of testing. Sometimes you just need to get in the market and figure out if that's true. And then just listening to what the feedback is. I think some great ideas were very rudimentary in the core of it. And there was good essence, right? There was maybe this part of it was good. This other part was a little dicey. If you can go and reveal that to the market you're trying to address, you're going to be able to get great feedback of the people that are actually going to fund your business long term. So as far as your question directly, thinking through what is the time to maybe give up on something, what's the time to move forward. If you had unlimited resources, you could probably just keep, pounding the wall and then figure things out. But just being attentive to what clients and what customers are saying, I think whatever timeline that makes the most sense for your business, there's always a chance to figure things out. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and he mentioned he made the pocket knife that has all the little gadgets that come out of it. And I think he sold one pocket knife in like 7 years. And he was doing other businesses. It wasn't his, core focus, but it was a focus he was really passionate about. And then finally, someone gave him the big break. So for me, that's a little bit too long of a timeline. I don't know if I'd be able to have that patience and courage, just keep, banging down the door. But if you truly feel like there's a market for the opportunity you're trying to offer, then, time will tell, but usually you'll be all right.
So I guess in a sentence, you got to bet on yourself using your words.
Yeah, you got to bet on yourself. You got to be smart about the market. You got to do the research and then ultimately see whether or not the market's going to receive it well.
That's great. Thanks so much for talking about that. Earlier, you mentioned something about how it's risky to start a business. I want to say it's the exact opposite. I think it's risky to not start a business.
Yeah.
Relying on only one stream of income. I guess, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you are an entrepreneur right now. And what are your thoughts or piece of advice for some of your friends that are thinking it's too risky to start a business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to me, it goes back to happiness, right? And whatever that might look like. I mean, I worked until 3:30 yesterday morning. So I know how to work hard, know how to work fast. To me, that's enjoyable. I like working. I like moving things forward. But you have to figure out what that is in your life. And as you mentioned and alluded to it really well, the risk of staying in a role or a job or whatever it might be where you're not happy is so much more aggressive than taking the risk of going and doing something you love. And Jim Carrey, he gave a speech at a university, kind of a graduation speech, and he talked about his father, who was an accountant. And his father could have been a comedian, could have done a lot of things. And he said when they were growing up, his father got let go from that job. And he said it was the biggest lesson he ever learned from his father, because you can fail at what you don't want. So you might as well give a shot at doing what you love. And for me, that's always been wise words to live by. I know it's something that's emotional, obviously, in Jim Carrey's life, but you might as well try something you enjoy doing because we have to do it, right? Work is part of life unless you're, blessed with winning the lottery or have a trust or something like that. You got to work and you got to enjoy what you do.
That's a great piece of advice. So you just recently started in COVID during the COVID time, so about 2 years ago. During that time, is there something you would do again if you had a redo? You're like, I wish this could have gone smoother. What would I have done differently? Or what would you have done differently?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we probably could have marketed a little bit more the COVID angle, if you will, if we truly saw. I mean, everything's 2020 hindsight, right? History always looks better in the rearview mirror. But if we could have foresaw just how long it was going to take for businesses to really get back up and going, so much of what you saw in the debt market and the equity market as well, the market's just freezed up, right? So companies couldn't really get capital. Businesses that had working capital were very conservative with how they were spending it. Some might see the services we offer as more of an ancillary service. We view it as a core service to grow and scale. So it's depending on how you view it or your perception of that. But I think if we would have been able to market and shift a little bit more, that COVID is going to be a very clear line in the sand, what businesses are going to survive and what ones aren't. And in order to grow, you're going to need capital, you're going to need resources. And like Panera did during the financial recession, Panera was hiring hundreds of people when everybody else was letting them go. So they were getting top tier talent. And when, it wasn't COVID, when the financial crisis ended, they were leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else because they were investing in a difficult time when a lot of people weren't. So it's difficult to do. It's difficult to, drive right into the fire, push right through the storm. But if we were able to pivot a little bit in that regard, I think that would have been helpful.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Let's switch gears a little bit. As an entrepreneur, I'm sure you got to balance work and life. Talk about your balance. Are you able to balance, or do you kind of integrate it? Do you enjoy it, or what's something? Or just tell me about your situation, what you may change, if anything.
That's a great question. So my definition of balance has changed a lot over my life. Growing up, I had a mother who loves me and still loves me. And she always talked about having a crazy balanced life, right? You got to have all these different buckets, all these different categories. They all need to be equal because that's how you live happily. And it wasn't until, honestly, in the last couple of years, I heard a David Goggins podcast. And for those of you who don't know David Goggins, former Navy SEAL, done ultra running marathons, just crazy, crazy athletic guy, crazy determined guy. And he talks about in order to be the best at whatever you want to do, there's going to be seasons where you can't be balanced, where you can't have everything be perfect. And if you push through those seasons, you're going to be able to help so many other people because you would have gone through something, but you've also would have become an expert in what you do. So for me, in my opinion, I'm still in a season of life where I'm willing to sacrifice a lot in order to grow my own business, in order to help other businesses grow. And the sacrifice that I'm willing to make is equated based on the amount I work and the amount I pour into business. Thankfully, as you said, it is a little bit more of an integrated definition where I truly enjoy work. So staying up until 1, 2, 3 in the morning, as long as I feel somewhat rested, that's still enjoyable for me. But there's definitely a time for friends, for family. I love both of those in my life. I love to golf as well. But it's finding the time and place, I think, for all that. And if you're in a season of growing, in a season of investing, there's nothing wrong with that. I think the persona in the market is that you have to be fully balanced. You got to carve out all these things, but as long as you're happy and doing something you love and moving forward, making progress, I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Got it. Do you think having a routine in place would help? And do you have a routine?
I do, to an extent. Obviously, it depends on the demands of the day a little bit, but for me, it's fairly straightforward. I'll get up in the morning, call it 7 a.m. I'll get plugged in and whatnot, probably about 8 a.m. I'll work from 8 or 8:30 to call it 6 p.m. I'll go have a little downtime, if you will, have dinner. I'll work out, get some exercise, just unplug for a couple hours. I'll plug back in from 8 p.m. and then work, 8 p.m. to 1:30-ish in the morning. And I'll go to bed and do it again. So for me, it all depends on the people. A lot of people talk about, I need 8 hours sleep. I need 9 hours sleep. I'll concede that there's been studies that show that sleep helps. After working on Wall Street, I've learned how to just not go with a ton of sleep, I guess. So to me, as long as you're in that routine, it's very doable. It's when you break that routine that it gets difficult. So for me, I can't, work until 3:30 and then get up at 6 every day because that's just not sustainable. But as long as you can have somewhat of a time frame where you're doing things, I think you'll be all right. And staying hydrated has always been my kind of key to success through that as well.
Always drink water. That's such a good tip. Awesome, Brock. Thanks so much for sharing that. What is your favorite business book and why?
That's a great question. I love to read. Reading is important for business, important for growth and development, all that stuff. I would say the most recent business book I read And I joke with some of my business colleagues, I feel like I was getting a retainer or some type of royalty for plugging this guy's book all the time. But if you haven't checked out Chris Voss's book, it talks about negotiation, talks about everything in between. Never Split the Difference is the title. It's such a great book just to learn really about communication. Negotiation is just communication. And no matter what you do, Chris talks about every single day you're negotiating and you don't even realize it, but you really are going about that activity. So if you can find a way to find a beneficial outcome for you that also honors the other person, you're going to be in a great spot in business and life and in so many other areas. So if you haven't read Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, definitely a good read.
I want to mirror that, or I want to. Yeah, I'd also endorse that book. It's a great book. He also has a bunch of YouTube videos too, and
Yeah.
I really respect and like his education. Well, this has been an incredible conversation, Brock. Where can our audience get in touch with you?
Yeah, best spot to find me is on LinkedIn. Broc W Edwards should have a beautiful smiling picture of myself, founder Pronoia. You can find it on there, and happy to connect and message and set up calls and everything from there.
Awesome, Brock. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate having me.